This lesson is on section 3.1, parallel lines and transversals. We've discussed parallel lines. We know that they are two coplanar lines that will never intersect. They're the same distance apart all the time. What is a transversal? A transversal is simply a line that crosses two or more lines at different points. So really the only restriction is that it can't be a star. So you can't have two lines and then or have two lines that cross and then have the transversal go through both of them at the same point. A transversal hits one line in one point and then hits another line in another point. The lines do not have to be parallel. I drew them parallel here for the purpose of our lesson, but they could easily go like this and that would still be considered a transversal. When you have two lines cut by a transversal, it creates 8 angles. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And those 8 angles have several different relationships. The relationships here are listed. For example, the first pair that we are going to talk about is called alternate interior angles. They are called alternate interior angles because they are on alternating sides of the transversal, and yet they are on the interior of the parallel lines. So the pairs in this picture would be 3 and 6 would be alternate interior, and 4 and 5 would be a pair of alternate interior. One easy way to recognize alternate interior angles is with a Z. If you see a Z shape, anytime you see a Z shape, then those two angles are alternate interior angles. And obviously it goes the other way. In this case, it looks more like an S. So that way would also be alternate interior angles. So Z's and S's, that's your key for alternate interior angles. Now, if these two lines happen to be parallel, then the alternate interior angles will be congruent. They will be exactly the same shape, or exactly the same measure. So angle 3 and angle 6 would both be the same measure, and angle 4 and angle 5 would both be the same measure. Alternate exterior angles work pretty much the same way. It's just that instead of being on the inside of the parallel lines, they're on the outside of the parallel lines. So that would be angles 1 and 8 and angles 2 and 7. Those are alternate exterior angles. Again, if our lines happen to be parallel, then those angles would be congruent to each other. They would have the same measure. Another thing we're going to look at is same side interior angles. Same side interior means they're on the same side of the transversal on the inside of the parallel lines. So that would be angles 4 and 6 and angles 3 and 5. Those, if our lines are parallel, are supplementary angles. If you remember, supplementary means that they add up to 180. So 4 and 6 would add up to 180 degrees and 3 and 5 would add up to 180 degrees. One nice way to remember that is since same side starts with S, so does supplementary, so the same side angles are supplementary. Same side exterior works exactly the same way, except that they're on the outsides of the parallel lines. So 1 and 7 would be same side exterior, and 2 and 8 would be same side exterior. Corresponding angles are the angles that if I took this group of 4 angles here, if I took this group and I dropped it down on top of this group of 4 angles, which ones would land on top of one another? Those are corresponding angles. They're in the same place in corresponding intersections. So angle 2 and angle 6 would be corresponding angles, because if I picked up angle 2 and slid it down, it would land directly on angle 6. 4 and 8 are corresponding, 3 and 7 are corresponding, and 1 and 5 are corresponding angles. They are also congruent. That would make sense, because if I'm going to drop it down and it's going to land on the other one, they should be the same measure if their lines are parallel. Remember, this column only holds true if our lines are parallel. Vertical angles, we've talked about those, but certainly there are several pairs. 1 and 4 are vertical, and 2 and 3 because there's an X there. Remember, vertical angles form an X. Anytime you see an X, you've got vertical angles. And 5 and 8 and 7 and 6. The last pair we're going to talk about is a linear pair. A linear pair is a pair of angles that are supplementary and adjacent. So supplementary and adjacent. So basically they form a line if you put the two angles together. So 1 and 2 would be a pair of a linear pair. 3 and 4, there's tons of them. 5 and 6, 7 and 8. You could also go up this way. 5 and 7 would be a linear pair. 3 and 1, 2 and 4, 6 and 8. All of those would be linear pairs. Okay. One way that you're going to see these, other than just lines cut by a transversal, one real-time place that you might see these is, for example, inside this quadrilateral. This happens to be a trapezoid, which tells me that this line and this line are parallel. We use arrows to show that lines are parallel. So if you see those, that means those lines are parallel. And in a trapezoid, since lines are parallel, this line would be considered a transversal. If I draw it a little bit different, it's a little bit easier to see. This would be your transversal, this would be your parallel lines. So these two angles are on the same side of the parallel line, or of the transversal, on the interior of the parallel lines. So they are same side interior angles. If they are same side interior angles, if you look back on your chart, same side interior angles are supplementary. So that means I know that those two angles are supplementary. I know that if I take x plus 4 and add it to 3x plus 6, that I have to get 180 degrees because they are supplementary. From there you could do your algebra skills, so it'd be 4x plus 10 equals 180, so 4x equals 170. And then you would divide out your 170 by 4, and you would get 42.5. And then you would could stick that back in there to get your angle measures. So 42.5 plus 4, the measure of this angle would be 46.5. And this one you'd take 3 times 42.5, and that would give you 127.5 plus 6 would give you, oh, I missed it. So it would be what, 133.5. Yes, because that would add up to 180. Okay? So that's how that goes. And that's it. That is the end of this lesson. So your homework is as follows.